The video you're about to watch is going to provide you with a solution to government corruption. Many thousands of hours of research have gone into formulating this strategy, which we will be able to use to deliver justice to all politicians and central bankers who are working to bring forth their Great Reset. Please listen very carefully to this critically important warning, which I have selected out of the documentary film by David Rogers Webb, The Great Taking.
It is not your insolvency that causes the loss of your assets. It's the insolvency of the people that secretly used your collateral as their property without telling you that or disclosing it.
When more people really understand how this system works, the only conclusion you can come to is that we must have a debt jubilee on all bank debt. It is the only way forward. Here's my promise to you. The solution that I have will bring an end to debt. It will bring an end to the slavery of taxation. It will bring an end to the failing infrastructure all around us and kick off a golden age of absolute abundance for all, funded by the criminal oligarchs who have been fleecing our society for centuries.
The power behind all of this is the private control of the central banks. And when you look around the world, they are all privately controlled. You are not allowed to know, actually, who controls the Federal Reserve. It is linked with the war machine, this private control of money. The intelligence agencies, the militaries globally would not be able to function as they are if they weren't linked with this money creation.
How do you feel about your tax dollars being used to fund mass murdering war criminals?
We have less freedom today than the colonists did who fought a revolution against the king.
Why are we still paying taxes when we can see that our governments are trying to destroy us?
Taxation without representation is tyranny.
How do you feel watching on as your political leaders are committing acts of genocide at home and abroad on your dime?
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
America is responsible for genocide in Gaza because we supplied the weapons and ammunition with which to do it.
Have you ever asked yourself why governments need our tax dollars when they work hand in hand with central banks to just print the stuff that we have to work for? Why do they need our money when they can just print it?
The tax system is really a way of harassing and subjugating people.
Let's say they couldn't print it. Let's say that we actually used real money, which is gold and silver. Fiat currency is actually for slaves. Free people use real money. So let's just say that we were living in a world where we all used real money. When every nation on the planet is so rich in natural resources, why on earth do we need to pay taxes? There's more than enough natural resources on every continent to fund the things like roads and public infrastructure. But why does it have to come from us when they can print it or mine it? I'll tell you why. Because if we were able to keep 100% of the proceeds of our labor, we would prosper. We would have free time. And when you have free time, you're able to kick back and relax and think about the state of the world and think about the things that politicians do. And look at how they work hand in hand with mega corporations and central banks and these elitist central banking families, and we'd look at these things and we'd notice how evil it all is. And then we might actually find the time to stand up against it.
And I think we need some type of intervention as a species. We need We need a change. We need an intervention in some way.
Well, my name's Ricky DeBono, and you're watching Flipping the Tables, where we are going to be flipping the tables on this rotten establishment and kicking off a golden age from right here. We need to get out of this era of mass global slavery.
This system that extracts resources from people and places enormous stress on them, that funds psychological operations that are, of course, public-facing. They're used against the population so that the resources of the public are extracted, tremendous burdens are placed on people, stresses. It's a system that subjugates people. And if that simply stops, everything gets better immediately. Central banking should be a public utility. The very idea that it should be controlled by private interests, that is the source of all the problems for humanity. That must stop. That must stop.
As long as we're being oppressed by evil oligarchs who control our politicians and drain us from 30, 40, 50, even up to 60% of our income, we are effectively living as slaves.
The history of the Declaration of Independence, the taxes over which they revolted, none of them exceeded 3%. Today, of course, you know what we pay. In the Northeast, could be upwards of 50 to 58 or 59%. So half your time is spent working for the government.
We need to bring an end to that, and I know exactly how to do it.
And 3% was enough to trigger a revolution.
That's why this channel is here. That's my promise to you. That's my commitment to you. That's my commitment to God.
To use the expression of Antonio Gramsci, the truth is revolutionary, which is to say, there's no contradiction between pursuing truth, pursuing justice, and being on the side of the oppressed.
We have an imminent threat. We are being ruled over by the world's most evil monsters. You can hardly even call them people.
This is threatening everyone globally, all the way to the top of the system at the same time. Now, that sounds terrible, and it is, but that is actually a good thing, because divide and rule will not work. If everybody is in this and everybody wakes up and we get out of this unconsciousness, we have a problem of global unconsciousness where people do not want to face up to things.
And as the world moves into this mass awakening, I'm sure many of you will have noticed that the world is moving into this awakening. All the things that were in darkness are coming into the light now.
Society is the sum of its pieces. So if the individuals within a society are doing this work and you see them wake up, it causes a massive shift within the society itself.
I want to put a few questions to you. These are the sorts of questions that we need to be asking to make sure that we move forward into a just world, to make sure that when politicians commit crimes, they're held to account just the same as you and I would be. And the first question that I would ask you to put some thought into is, I want you to think about the police that operate out of your neighborhood.
In 2024, there's a lot of universal buzz around police forces. There will be a lot of confusion and mixed tactics in the police force. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that police forces will be adopting technologies and programs and strategies that are in alignment with the idea that they are protectors of the peace and that they are there for the people and on the side of the people, while at the very same time, they will continue to militarize in alignment with the idea that they exist to protect the powers that be against the people.
We got the guys to blow your brains out, so you better watch out!
From local interactions between police officers and civilians to more global terrorist attacks, especially in Europe, the contradictory nature of the police force will be showcased and on full display, and it's important to recognize that split that exists in that specific field. At the same time as this, you're actually going to see even more of a split in the police force regarding the use of AI in predicting and preventing crime. This could lead to full-blown controversy, quite frankly, regarding using AI to identify crime patterns, including locations and people who are likely to commit a crime.
How do you think they feel knowing that it is their willingness to follow orders and protect the ruling class that is actually bringing about the downfall of human civilization?
Once the bad guys have control of the apparatus of the state, you almost can't get rid of them. Once they control, the police and the army who all do what they're told, and the bureaucracies who do what they're told, you can't get rid of them. But now that they're in power and they're cementing themselves in power, how do you get rid of them?
We need a new movement. Again, people call it a Democratic and Republican Party. It's a crime syndicate.
Yeah, it is.
Any clear-thinking police officer would have to look at the things that they are asked to do.
This guy sells milk. State troopers got a search warrant. The guy sells milk that it's unadulterated. And you make this point because it's really about how we're losing our rights.
And the state police raided his farm and stole all of his farm products because of a search warrant authorizing them to do so. Now, a search warrant can only be based on probable cause of crime. But here's a guy who sells milk, and the state police show up, knock on the door, walk in, steal everything he has, and then put a sign up saying, "Do not enter. Do not buy anything from this place. It's unsafe and it's unhealthy." What the hell are the police to say that?
And then look at the things that politicians do and get away with.
I will sign an executive order that will now require all executive branch federal employees to be vaccinated. All.
You're saying now's the time to hit Iran?
Now's the time to hit their leaders.
Go home and stay home.
And I've been saying for 6 months now, hit Iran, blow it off the map.
And the people who control the politicians, the things that they get away with.
Normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
So we have to prepare for a more angry world. And how to prepare? I don't have too many remedies. The remedies have to be discussed through dialogue by the stakeholders of our global system. And I see the need for action. I see the need for a great reset.
So I'm sure that police look at all the organized crime that has infiltrated all the major institutions that once were the fabric of our society. They've all been infiltrated by this billionaire class.
Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
Police allow these crimes to carry on. They allow these crimes to carry on because they protect this billionaire class. It's the fact that police exist in that role and they are willing to follow orders that people like you and I can't go out and deal with the real criminals. We can't go out and take care of these politicians that need to be actually put in prisons in place of all the prisoners who are wasting away in jail for non-violent crimes. They need to be swapped over. Non-violent crimes are not crimes. Everything's broken. The police in your neighborhood are looking at this. They must be thinking about the role that they play. If it wasn't for them, all this criminality in high places couldn't happen. They must be seeing this. What about the military? The soldiers? The young 18, 19, 20-year-old men who go in there thinking that they're going to serve their country?
It's historically been true that the people most marginalized within the United States end up as the cannon fodder of empire.
And now they'll be looking around at what's going on. They'll be looking at what just happened in Ukraine. Estimates are around 400,000 Ukrainians have been killed. More than that, at least 400,000.
Ukraine has been a catastrophe. 500,000 deaths of Ukrainian young men.
The Russian army is an army of 1.5 million men. And all their resources are right there on that land. Whereas the Ukrainians had nothing. All their military resources had to come from the West. So there was never any possible way for Ukraine to beat Russia. There was nowhere near enough men and nowhere near enough weapons. Now just have a look at how these ruthless war criminals will insult the intelligence of every well-informed person.
Putin's already lost the war.
Putin has already lost in terms of what he was trying to achieve.
In many ways, Putin has already lost.
Putin has already lost this war.
And that is, Russia has already lost this war.
In short, Russia has lost. They've lost strategically, operationally, and tactically.
And now that all the Ukrainian men are dead, have a look at how this satanic mouthpiece for the Rothschild cartel is attempting to prepare the world for what he calls an acute event. An acute event that we all know will be a false flag attack funded by the same banking cartels for the very purpose of cashing in on the blood of the young men and women of the UK, who will be sent off to die on the battlefield to justify even further funding for weapons manufacturers.
If we go to war with Russia, we could find that our youth may have to be conscripted. That's a bit alarming.
Yes, head of the British Army, one of the most cerebral thinkers that we've got, a strategist. We need to listen and listen carefully. We've been too complacent. What's coming over the horizon should shock us. It should worry us, and we are not prepared.
But do shock tactics like those General Saunders is going to use, do those actually work?
Well, as I say, I think it's going to take repeating this message again and again and again, and there may be an acute event. That will wake everybody up to say, my goodness, yes, there is absolutely a threat there. It's now going to get more difficult as authoritarian states are rearming.
For anybody who buys this hoax about a Russian threat, please read Vladimir Putin's speeches before dragging us into a nuclear war. If you carefully read the subtitles, you'll know that this is all fear propaganda. There is no Russian threat.
We don't have enough members in the army, is that what you're saying?
Very much so. The army is now overstretched. It's down to 70,000 or so. Different reasons for that.
Let's just put the obvious reasons to the side for one moment and consider how long 70,000 men would last against 1.5 million men. Consider that the taxes that the British people pay fund the salary of people like this who will knowingly send his own people off to their death.
I know Grant Shapps recognises this, recognises the concerns here. There's also the state of our reserves as well. They're the ones that will be pulled in if we need to mobilise too. But ultimately, as I say, it's a big mindset of Britain recognising just how dangerous our world is going. What is our role to step forward, as we've done in the past, to defend what's important to us?
So are you suggesting the defence budget should be up at 5% as it was during the Cold War?
To jump to 5%, they wouldn't even know what to do with that money straight away. It takes time to procure the ships, the planes, the tanks, and so forth. What we do need to do is quickly move to 2.5% and then eventually 3%. In the Cold War, it was about 4%. In the Cold War, we had 36 fast jet squadrons. We're down to about 6 today. And that's just an illustration of just how small our armed forces are.
Military personnel today can see that. They can see that the Ukrainian military was essentially sacrificed for the purpose of using up weapons stocks. They gave their lives to enrich the military-industrial complex.
Guy by the name of Dwight D. Eisenhower, farewell address. The military-industrial complex is robbing the nation of the genius of the scientists, the sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
63% of the people living paycheck to paycheck. Hey, we got wars to fight!
And the soldiers that live near you, the military personnel, they're seeing this. How do you think they're feeling right now as they're watching Israel commit a genocide against 2 million innocent people that are trapped in a 25-mile strip with nowhere to escape, and they're just being bombed? And the West is 100% in support of that genocide.
Israel has a right to defend itself.
The soldiers in your neighborhood, in your state, the military personnel, they're looking at this, they're watching this. Have you put any thought into what changes would have to be made for the prosperity of the 1% to be moved over to the people? How would that happen? What would it look like? I've spent the best part of the past 7 years meditating deeply on these questions. And I'm pleased to be able to report to you that I've come up with a lot of answers. Answers that, when you hear them, they seem quite obvious, but I'm not hearing anybody say the things that I'll be sharing on this channel. Most of us tend to feel as though we're civilians, we're the people, and then the police and military, like they're on one side and we're on the other side. And that's a mistake. At this point, the police and military are still human beings. We can still talk to them. And I know if you're anything like me, your gut reaction will be to reject an idea like that out of hand. So I'll tell you a couple of the key things about my life that I believe have had a huge impact on me and made me care so much about these things that I'm talking about. And this is very relevant to the whole point of this video, because you, the viewer, the audience, you all deserve to know exactly why it is that I feel it's so important for me personally to play a role in helping to unite the people together with the armed forces. Before I was born, my father had his own real estate agency, and before I was born, the government took his license off him. My father never robbed anyone. He definitely never did anything like lending money that he didn't have, like banks do every day. One of the things I'll be talking about on my channel is how the economic system works. I'm sure many of you will know that banks don't actually have the currency that they lend to you. That's how they inflate the money supply, is by you going for a loan. They just do what's called a digital ledger entry. They just type the digits in to the person who's selling the property. They type the digits into their account, and that's how new money comes into the system. Which means that every dollar in existence is owed to a bank. What does that tell you about the precarious position of everything that you've worked for? One thing it should tell you is, for you to keep your belongings, somebody else has to be losing theirs. And sooner or later, that somebody else is going to be all of us, because of the way these greedy criminal banking cartels have secretly leveraged all of our collateral.
It is not your insolvency that causes the loss of your assets. It's the insolvency of the people that secretly used your collateral as their property without telling you that or disclosing it.
When more people really understand how this system works, the only conclusion you can come to is that we must have a debt jubilee on all bank debt. It is the only way forward. The criminal bankers are well aware of that fact, and that's why they intend to use our impoverished situation to back us into having to accept their CBDC Hunger Games dystopian nightmare, which is how they intend to make us pay the penalty for their crimes. But I've got a much better idea than that. And it includes justice. But I'll quickly finish telling you what they did to my dad. They lend all this currency that they don't actually have. And my father certainly never did anything like that. But they took his license away. And then I came along, and within 2 years of my birth, the Cancer for Profit establishment essentially killed my mother for profit. One of the things I can tell you about me is I never got to meet my mother because the medical establishment decided to profit from what they call treatment, which is far from treatment. And they are still carrying out the same barbaric practices to this day. Imagine being in my dad's shoes. They've taken his business, then they've killed his wife. Then the last property that my father owned, was stolen from us when I was 5 years old. This is one of my first memories, because I don't remember my mother, but when I was 5, I do remember us being moved out of my father's home. It was something that I would not wish upon anyone. And the Great Taking is about what these high-level central banking families have done with our systems of law and property rights. Our property rights have been corrupted by these banking cartels, and we actually no longer have property rights. We don't know it yet because the collapse hasn't happened. But when the financial crash happens, the way they have rigged the legal infrastructure is in such a way that all property rights, whether you own your property and not just your home, but also your car, your belongings, all property rights have been given to these central banking families under the law.
They're not going after just property that is encumbered by debt. They've engineered this so they can take all securities as collateral from people and entities that have no borrowings against them.
I've already had my family home stolen. That house that was stolen from my father right now would be worth over possibly $4.5 million. And when my father passed away, he had a few $100s in his wallet. He died broke. The government stole everything from him. I'm sure as hell not going to let them steal this property from me. And that's the goal. The World Economic Forum has been telling us since 2017 that you will own nothing and you'll be happy. Now Webb has actually explained how that's going to happen in law.
What everyone's talking about, is it a great reset for you? Is there a reset?
Well, you know, there has to be a reset of some kind. We just don't want the reset that they have planned for us. So this is the most profound time in human history, what we're facing right now, because the thing I say to people is this is threatening everyone globally and all the way to the top of the system at the same time. As I say toward the end of the book, wealthy people think they're special. You are special. They're saving you for dessert. And you let that sink in. So everybody has to get busy with this, including people who believe that they are powerful and they can make a difference.
These things are real. This is what has happened to our system. If they're going to take everything I've worked for, well, they're not going to do it with me just lying down silently. I'm going to fight to keep what I've worked for, and I'm asking you to join me, because what's happening now is across the world, families are having their homes stolen from them because they're unable to keep up on the mortgage payments.
Mortgages are up an average of $1,500 a month. Look at why that's happening. The Reserve Bank claims it needs to raise interest rates to fight inflation. The idea is if the Reserve Bank raises interest rates enough, mortgage holders won't have money to spend. Now, I'm not kidding. This is what the Reserve Bank means when they say they are fighting inflation. They are sending Australians broke to solve a problem that the Reserve Bank created together with the Morrison government.
And people are blaming themselves. They think that they're not able to earn enough money, so it's their fault. So in most cases, they literally just pack up and move out and give the properties that they've invested their lives into over to the banks, even though the banks are recording record high hundreds of billions of dollars in profits.
What a sick joke. No one in this country is going to take that for much longer, because there's enough people in this country now who are screwed over by a political system that snarls and attacks anyone who asks for more, while we've just seen the banks record tens of billions of dollars in profit. If anyone thinks that's normal, and thinking that in a wealthy country like this, the fact that the banks are making billions of dollars in profit, you've got an absolute another thing coming. The only radicals in this place are the ones who think that it's okay to give yourselves $9,000 extra a year off on your tax, while telling people they have to live on $52 a day. What a sick joke.
On top of the hundreds of billions of dollars in inflation that they just create for themselves out of thin air.
During COVID, the Reserve Bank printed roughly $500 billion, $500 billion new dollars, out of thin air, using what they call electronic ledger entries. Their words. $500 billion conjured up out of thin air and dropped from a helicopter to compensate for the Liberal government's economy-wrecking COVID restrictions that weren't necessary. That $500 billion is new money in a major cause of the inflation problem Australia is still fighting. And who got the money? Largely foreign-owned multinationals.
And hard-working families are having their homes stolen, and there's 5-year-old little boys out there who are having their parents are having their homes stolen, and they're going to live a life of struggle, all because too many of us don't understand the moral depravity of this economic system, if you can call it that. It's a slavery system. There are people suffering with mortgage stress and losing their homes all around me.
Before today's decision on interest rates, the average monthly mortgage payment has increased more than $1,200 a month. So why does the Reserve Bank of Australia want to send people broke? We've been told it's all about inflation, yet very few news reports tell us the whole story. The RBA is trying to send people broke to fix the inflation the RBA created. Inflation is a tax on all of us. Now Labor is continuing to make it worse, handing out billions of dollars in subsidies and allowing millions of overseas arrivals, further driving up demand. Yet now the Reserve Bank says it can fix inflation. How? Raising interest rates so people have less money to spend and send mortgage payers broke. The Reserve Bank admitted to me that it's a blunt tool. That's the understatement of the year. The Reserve Bank is raising home borrowers' mortgage payments so that on average people have less money to spend, to try and fix the inflation they caused and that the Labor government keeps making worse.
And the Treasurer will have to provide relief without adding to the problem by putting too much money in people's pockets.
My mortgage has almost doubled. See, I went through the 2008-2009 period. I had a mortgage back then that I took out that mortgage on my upper limit, and when interest rates doubled, that was some of the worst years of my life. I nearly ended up bankrupt. It took years off my life just to tread water through those years. And so now the property that I'm in, I live in a property that I could afford double what the mortgage was when I bought this place. So now that it's doubled, I'm within my safe range, but a lot of people are not. And that is unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable to everyone. It has to be unacceptable to everyone. And the only reason it's not is because people don't understand. People don't understand that when the banks lend that money that goes into the account of the property seller, they never had that money.
Electronic ledger entries.
And when the police go out and kick people out of their homes to give that property to the banks, the police actually think that they are protecting the bank depositors, even though that has nothing to do with it. The deposits that people put in the bank are no longer theirs. As soon as you put money in the bank, it's not yours anymore. If the bank has a crisis, your money's gone. I hope you realize that's how it works. That is how it is.
9,000 banks in the United States were forced into failure. The people who had money in those banks lost all their cash, but their debts were not canceled. Their debts were then consolidated into the Federal Reserve System and enforced. Their debts were not canceled. Their debts were consolidated and enforced. So people that were in debt were in trouble. Even wealthy people lost everything.
Even though when they lend fiat currency, they don't actually have it. Digital ledger entries. The police don't understand this stuff. They will actually follow orders, go out there and kick an innocent family out of their home that they've been sweating over for many, many years. And they just have it stolen out from under them because they're having a few bad months which were inflicted on them by the governments and banks who control this system. This is a level of injustice that there is nothing that could make this tolerable for me, and I know I'm not alone.
Divide and rule will not work. Everybody is in this, and everybody wakes up.
It has to be stopped, and it can be stopped. It can be stopped. The police officers who do this work, they're human beings. They just need to be awakened and enlightened to the truth of what's really happened to our systems here in the West.
It's so important to spread this awareness of this beforehand so that people understand what is happening and so that people can become engaged in this. It has the potential to activate very capable people. It has the potential to unify people against this.
We do need to be communicating with the armed forces. I'm probably the last person on earth who anybody would expect to say that. I was raised in a family who was constantly harassed by police. In my family, you just don't talk to police. You don't answer questions. You don't have anything to do with them. And I'm going against everything that I was raised to think and feel about police because I can see that we have two options.
You raised your hand in a clenched fist and you chanted "off the pig." You know what "off the pig" meant? Kill the cops. Off the pig. That meant kill the cops. In our country, you're allowed to advocate the violent overthrow of the government. You are legally allowed to advocate the violent overthrow of the government. There's a long constitutional history in that.
We either take up arms, and in Australia we don't even have arms, so whatever arms we can, and go to war against the police in order to get to the ruling class behind them. And ultimately we will win because there's way more of us than there is even police and military. Even if they were to come together, the people will always win. But why would we even consider such a bloodbath of an idea when the police and the people are on the same side? We have this network of secret societies and central banking cartels that are controlling all politicians, all militaries, all police. They have such a tight grip of control on every ruling establishment across the planet.
This is the power that controls everything. They control all political parties, all governments, all the major corporations, the media.
They can only control that establishment through the willingness of police and military to inflict violence on their behalf. And so why do police and military do it? Why do these men and women, at this point they're still human beings, and I do believe that that's going to change, which is why we need to get onto this.
How far away are we from something that's really truly sentient?
It's definitely going to be outside of human control.
Not necessarily bad, right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily bad. It's just outside of human control. Now, the thing that's going to be tricky here is that it's going to be very tempting to use AI as a weapon. In fact, it will be used as a weapon. So the danger is going to be more humans using it against each other. That'll be the danger.
If the good people of the armed forces don't join together with the good people of the world in this fight against evil, these things are going to be ruling over all of us with an iron fist, and it will be too late to do anything about it. So before we're able to formulate a comprehensive plan to unite us, we need to get to the bottom of why it is that police continue to serve evil. Only then will we be able to look at what we can do about it. So why do they do it? There's two reasons why they do it. And the first one is survival.
Money is a very sophisticated control system because it requires almost no energy input. People are directed by chasing money incentives.
They believe that if they don't follow orders, they won't get their paycheck. And of course, that's true to a certain extent. But there is a solution to that, which I'll get to. And of course, the other reason is simply that they don't actually know. They haven't seen the big picture yet. They don't really understand who has taken control of their entire establishment.
The power behind all of this is the private control of the central banks. And when you look around the world, they are all privately controlled. You are not allowed to know, actually, who controls the Federal Reserve and how it is controlled. We know that it is controlled somehow by a set of banks. So there is some kind of an ownership structure that extends through the banks that own and control the Fed. But something like this is done in all central banks around the world. If you notice, any country that has attempted to have a national bank is literally attacked and destroyed. They're not allowed to exist. They're not allowed to exist.
What we need to be doing right now is turning up the heat on Iran. We need to act to decimate the Iran central bank. We need to act to decimate the Iran central bank, the assets that they've held there. We need to lean on international banks to seize the assets of Iranian proxies. We need to put big-time pressure, maximum pressure on their oil exports. There's a lot that we could do to Iran to send a message.
I'm sure you'll all agree, most cops still think that politicians are in control. They have no idea about any of this stuff. For many of them, especially the young ones, they will still think that they're there to serve and protect. Many of them are still not even aware of the logical attack that was forced onto them.
Okay, this is a graph of all-cause mortality in Australia over the last 10 years, with respiratory disease and COVID removed to focus on all other causes of death, graphed as a percentage of population. The source is the recently released ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics, Cause of Death Report, which added 2022 data. You'll also note that the COVID measures themselves in 2020 did not have a noticeable impact on deaths, meaning there was something else in play. And then in 2022, shot up, clearly significant. So that peak that you see there, this is about half to two-thirds of all casualties in World War II. I also have papers here that are available online by statistician Wilson Tsai, a statistical evaluation of COVID-19 injections for safety and effectiveness in the New South Wales epidemic, and Australian COVID-19 pandemic, a Bradford Hill analysis of iatrogenic excess mortality. That graph It provides many graphs which clearly show correlation up and down with the injections, clearly. If this excess death in 2022 is not caused by the COVID injections, what the hell is the cause? The figures on excess mortality show that around about 25,000, 26,000 people, perhaps as high as 30,000, died as a result of homicide.
I believe the bankers did this because they want us to get rid of the political class for them. And that's why it's so important that the people and the police put their heads together and really start thinking about what these monsters have in mind for after we've gotten rid of the political class. There is absolutely no reason for the police and military to have any loyalty to this rotten system that has attacked them in this way. The coercion that these people have been put through, the absolute abuse that they are put through in training in order to break down their own character so that they don't think for themselves and form their own opinions and beliefs. They're put under such a mind control with that abusive training that they go through, and it's all very carefully calculated because the ruling class, they can't risk police and military personnel thinking for themselves. So these people have really had a number done on them. And based on my family history, I'm the last person who should be advocating for us to get behind them. I'll tell you more about that in future videos. For right now, we need to find a way to put a stop to politicians who are committing crimes like this.
We have agreed to mandate vaccination. Cabinet has decided today that vaccinations will be mandated.
The Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency put in a Freedom of Information request for Pfizer's post-marketing data regarding their... But it was denied. So they sued the FDA, and now the document is available to those who care to seek it out.
This covers the first 2.5 months of data. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, I'll move my cursor to that area, 1,223. That is the number of fatalities reported by people who received the Pfizer.
Within this document, there are 8 pages of injuries and deaths reported.
How on earth is the public not absolutely livid over this? I mean, because they don't know, that's why.
These people will follow orders and kidnap you, then lock you in a cage for selling a cancer-curing vegetable that has never caused one death in all of recorded history. And now we are expected to watch on silently as politicians get away scot-free in the presence of prima facie evidence of this ongoing crime against humanity. So I really should have no interest in wanting anything to do with police. But it's only logical that they would choose to unite with the people who are trying to warn and protect them over the criminal politicians who launched this attack against them. Not to mention the fact that they will suffer the same misery as the rest of us if we don't turn this around.
They must have a plan to stay in control through that collapse, which will require physical control over people through the reset, because the money control system has broken down. So this is why you have a period of terrible instability.
That's what police have got to look forward to. They don't want to do that. So the thing is, many of us think that if you're in trouble, if you need help, if somebody commits violence or theft against you, that you can call the police and they'll in some way save you. Well, that's not possible. Nothing can ever be done after the fact. Sometimes they find the criminal, but usually they just come along and make things worse. But we do tend to think of police as being somewhat of a savior, and the truth is, they need us to save them. They need our permission to deal with this in the appropriate way. Think about it. If they were to try and bring justice to the perpetrators of these global crimes without a movement of the people behind them, then they would wind up getting themselves charged with treason or some form of sedition, even though the treason and sedition has already taken place by the World Economic Forum and the people who are seated in power right now.
What we are very proud of now is that we penetrate the cabinets.
A morally upright and just solution to these issues actually requires a movement of the people to get behind them. When it's obvious on a global scale that we are behind them, then they'll have the confidence to know that if they arrest and detain their superiors, they'll have nothing to worry about. They know it when it comes down to it. They work for the people. But they take orders from higher-ups within their establishment who have all been bought out, who are all on the take, getting rich at the expense of the people who they're supposed to serve and protect. And this is all becoming very obvious. So we, the people, can give permission to the police to actually do the right thing. The most important thing about that fact is that we would be crazy to do such a thing unless we have very clear boundaries around why would we be going to the armed forces and giving them our permission to deal with these monsters. It's an enormous risk, because then what could happen is a mob of rotten cops could just infiltrate, and they're already in there. There's already a bunch of rotten cops and military personnel in the armed forces. So they could just be the ones to take over and end up ruling over us in just as evil a manner as the ones that are already ruling over us. So it's very important that before we ever consider such an idea, that we get very clear boundaries around why are we giving the police and military our permission to deal with this issue. And the main reason why we would and why it's a safe proposition is on very strict grounds that they do so because we want to live in a world where our rights are respected. And so this is a really important part of this video because most people don't actually understand what their rights are. They don't know how to define what a right is.
A right must be defined in the negative. This means that we can arrive at an understanding of the infinite amount of rights we have by knowing the very small amount of actions that are not rights, actions which are wrongdoings.
What do your rights consist of? It's a much more simple thing than most people think.
A right is an action that does not initiate harm to another sentient being.
You have the right to do everything that doesn't cause harm or loss to another person. We have so many rights that they can't actually be listed. They're infinite. It's like I have the right to go and buy a pair of boots. You know, you have the right to do whatever you want. You even have the right to buy and sell narcotics. That is actually our right. The criminalization of substances is just the most blatant claim of ownership over our bodies. Nobody profits from drugs and the so-called war on drugs more than the criminals that are in control right now. That's the key to the prison for profit industry. All the suffering related to the high price of drugs is what causes all the poverty and the crime and all this unnecessary misery is a product of people not understanding that they are the ones who have the right to choose what goes into their own body, the body that we own. It's our decision. Nobody has the right to tell us what goes in our body. Nobody has the right to stop you from engaging in civilized, voluntary commerce. It's only this rotten system of maritime law, this military control structure that they've tricked us into cooperating with, that they can take away all our rights and tell us all these things we can and can't do because we've been tricked into cooperating with a rotten system. And before we can give the armed forces our permission to do what needs to be done, they have to agree that the new system is a system that puts the rights of every man, woman and child above all else. There is already a law over creation. Moral people can never be enslaved.
What is natural law? Natural law is definitely not and has absolutely nothing to do with Darwin's theories on evolution, the Darwinian survival of the fittest, the so-called law of the jungle, or the so-called natural order of nature as a dog-eat-dog world. So, what actually is natural law? The definition of the word natural is inherent to and having a basis in reality and nature. In other words, not man-made. The definition of the word law is an existing condition that is both binding and immutable. Binding means having an effect that cannot be escaped. Immutable means unable to be changed by anything or anyone. Natural law, therefore, is a set of universal, non-man-made, binding and unchangeable conditions which govern the behavioral consequence of beings with the capacity for holistic intelligence. Natural law governs the aggregate or collective, free will behavioral choices of entire populations by manifesting the consequences of the behaviors that we choose. The consequences which we receive are always dependent upon whether our chosen behaviors are either moral or immoral, or in other words, right or wrong. While we all have free will to choose which behaviors we will conduct, we are not insulated from the moral consequences of our behavioral choices. Natural law is a body of laws that operate within the unseen or non-physical realm, so they may be considered to be occulted or hidden laws of nature. These laws are built into the fabric of reality, just like gravity and electromagnetism. However, since these governing dynamics operate in the non-physical realm, human beings must incorporate a much wider worldview in order to recognize and accept the existence and operation of these laws. The understanding of natural law is absolutely not a belief system or a religion. The workings of natural law can be discovered and understood through its observable, measurable, and repeatable effects in our world. In other words, the understanding of natural law actually constitutes a science of morality, which requires no belief or faith. Belief or disbelief in these laws is completely irrelevant, as they exist as surely as any physical law, such as gravity, which we take for granted in daily life. Natural law is also known as moral law, cosmic law, universal law, spiritual law, the law of cause and effect, consequentialism, the golden rule, karma, and many other names. Why is understanding natural law so important? The understanding of natural law is critically important to human beings who seek to live in freedom and peace together. Since natural law delivers the consequences of an entire society's behavioral choices based on whether their behavior is moral or not, it is of fundamental importance for human beings to know with certainty what the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior actually is.
So understanding what your rights are is really a question of understanding right from wrong. How do you define right from wrong? A lot of people don't know how to do that. Well, all wrongdoings can fit within these 7 categories: murder, rape, assault, trespass, coercion, theft, and deception. They're the 7 deadly sins. They're the real sins. This greed and gluttony and all this, that they're not sins. The real evil of this world will always fit into those 7 categories.
We can find that they are all variations of theft in one form or another. Murder is the theft of life which is not rightfully ours to take. Assault is the theft of another's well-being without right. Rape is the theft of free will sexual association. Theft is the stealing of property. Trespass is the theft of the security of one's living domain. Coercion is the theft of free will choice via violence or duress. And willfully lying is the theft of necessary information, which negatively impacts someone else's ability to engage in informed decision-making. These immoral behaviors constitute the very definition of violence. Violence is the initiation of harmful behavior against other sentient beings. The list of harmful behaviors just explained are transgressions against natural law because they are violations of the inherent rights of others. To violate the inherent rights of other beings through theft is actually what is meant to conduct violence. Since all wrongdoings are forms of theft, the natural law of moral conduct can ultimately be summed up in 2 words: don't steal.
This is the highest law that is in place. Our Creator put this law in place. And when we, the human family, don't cooperate with this law, we have slavery. When the human family understand this law and live in alignment with it, freedom is the only possible outcome. It may not be perfect, but it is the key to becoming an advanced species.
The Dogon tribe never had a military, police, or a jail system because they had zero crime. They would have disagreements, and then an elder would negotiate the terms of an agreement between the two sides, and that was the end of it. And here we got militaries, we got an Air Force, we got an Army, we got Marines, we got submarines and ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and nuclear warheads, and we got jails and prisons and all that, and we calling ourselves civilized. These people lived in a place during a golden age with no military, no police, no jails, and knew more about astrophysics than we knew, living in total peace and harmony. We don't know nothing. We still launching chemical propelled rockets into space. We know nothing.
See, a lot of people think that we're already so advanced and we've got all this technology. No, we are not advanced at all. We still drop bombs on each other and use combustion engines when we're surrounded by free energy. Free energy has been suppressed since Nikola Tesla was alive by these same people, by these same monsters, these evil, greedy monsters who only have the control they have because the police and military are willing to follow orders. And ultimately, they're the ones that pay the eternal price for following those orders. The evil monsters that give the orders through the chain of command, they're not actually committing any evil. So when they stand before God, they're probably not even going to have anything to answer for because they're not committing the acts of evil. It's not their hands that are doing anything.
But never will they become immortal and join us. Never will they receive the light and travel the stars. They will never reach the higher realms, for the killing of their own kind will prevent passage to the realm of enlightenment. This they will never know. The truth will be hidden in their face.
It's so important that the people who follow orders are enlightened. They need to understand how this law works. They need to see that when they live in alignment with it, everybody gets to prosper. There's no reason that anyone should go hungry. Poverty will evaporate because poverty is a product of this ruling class. There would be no taxes, there would be no ridiculous interest rates from banks, which is another form of slavery. Taxation and usury would literally evaporate the moment the armed forces understand that law and live in alignment with it. It's that simple. A lot of people wonder, if there's a God, why is evil allowed to exist? This is very relevant to what I'm talking about because I've spent many years looking into these things and I've come to understand that we actually need evil to show us the consequences of not living in alignment with God's highest law. The most beautiful thing about understanding this moral law, it actually proves to us that God is good. Our Creator wants us to live in freedom and abundance and prosperity. You can know this because only a good, generous, loving God would put such a law in place. The more time you spend imagining what our world would be like if the people who followed orders actually chose to live in alignment with this law, the more evidence you will accumulate that our Creator did everything possible from a systems management perspective to allow us to live in a free society in which all people equally get to benefit from this incredibly abundant planet we live on. The ruling class of our world, they understand this law so well, and they don't want everyone to benefit from the abundance of this planet. They want it all for themselves. And that's why everything they do is an act to rebel against this law. They understand full well that they need to keep us in a morally bankrupt state, and they own us.
Think about our society. People think that they shouldn't do anything unless they're being paid. And whatever they're being paid more to do, that's what they should do. This is how people direct themselves. That is no way to decide what to do. So So, but it's endemic in our society globally.
It's only endemic because we all need money to survive. And the ruling class use money to keep us in poverty. So oftentimes we are forced to put our moral principles second. They are manipulating our instinct to survive to keep us immoral through the use of the central banking fiat currency system. I hope you're all able to recognize that nothing that I'm talking about in this video has anything to do with personal opinion or belief. All I'm trying to do is share my observations. This is not my idea, this is ancient knowledge. What I'm talking about is interwoven through all the mystery traditions of Freemasonry, Kabbalah, the Kemetic traditions, the mystery schools, the ancient knowledge that the ruling class are raised with. They know this stuff, but they invert it and use it for their own power. When we learn something as simple as right from wrong, and we bring it to the police and military so that they can live in alignment with it, we will kick off a golden age. It will be the end of slavery. And we've got to be clear about what slavery is. Just because we can get up and do what we want with our days, that doesn't mean that we're free. When the things that we need to survive are so expensive, and if you don't pay your taxes, you are taken at gunpoint and imprisoned, we don't have freedom. And even more to the point, when you have one class of people who are able to print the stuff that the rest of us have to work for, that is the definition of a master versus slave dynamic. So this awakening that's happening, it's all about knowledge, and we need to bring this knowledge to the people who need it. Those people who follow orders and carry out wrongdoings on a daily basis are like the cornerstone holding up this Tower of Babel, this rotten to the core establishment of demons who are ruling over us very successfully. A very important principle about this moral law that I've been talking about and how to understand the difference between violence and physical force. So natural law, this law that we are all bound by, is held up by two pillars.
The non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle. The non-aggression principle is one of the main principles of natural law. This principle means that it is morally wrong to initiate aggression or violence upon other sentient beings. This brings us to another important principle of natural law, the self-defense principle. Individuals always reserve the natural right to use physical force to defend themselves against acts of violence conducted upon them. Self-defense is not and should never be considered to be violence. Self-defense against violence is an inherent right of all sentient beings.
Violence is always initiated. Violence is only violence when it happens first. So police still have a role to play. But if they want to experience this life as God intended, they have to stop dragging the rest of us towards the abyss. The truth is always very simple and elegant, and if you consider that I've taken barely 1 hour to outline all the details that we all need to know to live in a morally upright, lawful society that completely eliminates all the power that the ruling class have. If you think back over this video, I've told you quite a lot about myself. There's two reasons for that. Of course, this is my first video on this new channel, so people are going to want to know a little bit about me. But the main reason I told you all those things about my history and my childhood and the injustices that have been dealt to my family is because if That's the hand that I have been dealt, and I'm able to overlook the mistreatment that I've received, and I'm willing to forgive and forget, then I would say the majority of people around the world will also be able to overlook whatever harsh feelings they have towards police and military and approach police and military personnel as equals, as human beings, look upon them as people who have been victimized actually more than a lot of people. It's their own fault. They subjected themselves to it, but without having the underlying agendas explained to them. In many cases, they actually thought they were going in there to serve. And then we look at the way they treat people. It's hard to have any good feelings towards them at all. But you've got to realize that when you're the victim of abuse, they're the people that tend to abuse others. This satanic system relies on us being willing to perpetuate the abuse cycle. It has to stop somewhere, and we all have to be able to forgive. And the reason that I'm so willing to forgive police for all that they've put me through is because when you look at the hundreds of trillions of dollars that these evil families have put away, $500 trillion. And that's just the net worth of one family, the Rothschild family. There's 13 of the top level families. And then there's all the minions below them. If the armed forces want to earn back our trust, and they choose to agree with us, we will be able to build a new system and literally kick off a golden age. In my view, that's a pretty good reason to forgive people for their transgressions. Over a period of time, we can all gradually and peacefully let them know that they'll be among the richest people on earth. Instead of these evil banking cartels, the people who have the most wealth and abundance will be the people who help us to bring in a system that holds the rights of every living person above all else. So let me ask you this. If we find that over time there is a majority of police officers who are agreeing with what we are sharing and they are looking as though they are wanting to help us to bring in this new system, would you begrudge them all a minimum wage of $1 million a year? Would you hold that against them? If they make a decision to stop committing violence against innocent people and to actually help us bring in a righteous and a just system that scraps all these rubbish laws that just equal slavery, and actually implements God's highest law that no man has the right to inflict violence upon another, even a policeman. You know, if they agree to go along with that and they commit to that, you can't put a price on that, because what that means is very quickly everybody will get to realize there is so much opportunity here, there is so much abundance, there is ability on this planet for everyone to be rich. Maybe not rich like the people who have been enslaving us, but nobody needs that sort of wealth. Everyone can be very comfortable. Nobody should have to work ridiculous hours and be slaves to these evil monsters. It just comes down to one simple thing. Will the people who have been serving those evil monsters finally come to terms with the fact that there is actually a higher law that stands above anything that any politician can write down in a law book, that we're already bound by? The people who break that law every day in the job that they do, when they live in alignment with God's highest law, that will very rapidly educate everyone so that everybody understands the difference between right and wrong, and so that everybody is able to benefit from the wealth and abundance that is available to all of us. Everything will flourish so quickly. Even if they wanted $2 million a year, it's not like it's coming out of our pocket. We will never see that money. That astronomical wealth will stay in the hands of these evil monsters. So why would you begrudge the police having a pay rise when It's either they get a pay rise for helping us bring in a new system, or we remain slaves under a militarized police force who are going to come around and steal all our homes and our possessions and bring in this great reset.
I see the need for a great reset.
Yeah, we bet you do, Satan Klaus.
You know, if there's any decent police officers out there, there must be some somewhere. I mean, everybody from the World Economic Forum needs to be arrested. Everybody attached to the World Economic Forum needs to be arrested. Any politician, doesn't matter if they're a prime minister or a president, if they go to Davos and they support the World Economic Forum, they need to be arrested. They're part of a criminal cabal. Doesn't matter if they've maneuvered themselves into a position of power. You believe you've got to do what they say because they're in government. They are still part of a criminal cabal which is actively working to murder millions of people, depopulate this earth, create their great reset, and then run the whole show again. It's imperative that these people are arrested. Otherwise, the people are going to have to do it themselves. And if that happens, I mean, the last thing we want to do is to be going to war with the police. These guys are our countrymen. These guys are our friends. These guys are our family.
It's just too logical for us to let the police know that we're behind them and we want them to give themselves a pay rise and to do what needs to be done, and to let's move forward in a system where we're all united, a unified human race. The divisions are all manufactured. There's really only one division. That's the division between good and evil. Good people respect each other's rights. We don't steal things from other people. We don't commit violence against one another. And evil people do. These people who follow orders have gone for way too long not having it shown to them. It is actually their willingness to follow orders that is destroying the world for themselves and everyone else. You know, if they were the people that were profiting hundreds of billions of dollars from their evil, we might not have a chance of getting through to them. But these people are treated like garbage. You know, the pay that they get for what they do to their own souls is an insult. It is an absolute insult. And it's up to us to help them see that. It's up to us to decide where all that stolen wealth goes. It's our ancestors that the bankers have been thieving from. It's the many years of our lifetimes that have been stolen from us. All those years of hard labor while they sit back and enjoy the life of luxury for doing nothing but getting other people to commit evil on their behalf. That's all the bankers have ever done. So we are the ones who get to decide how the world moves forward, how the stolen wealth is going to be redistributed. We the people, we are the economy. We are the ones who inherited the earth, and we've all been stolen from. And that's why it's up to us to make sure that the armed forces understand that they have our permission to put these criminals on trial under common law so they can be judged by the people, and finally we'll all get to see justice be served. And think about the only realistic alternative. They can stay in their job, knowing for the rest of their lives they'll never get anything more than their paycheck, and sooner or later, and it's looking like it's going to happen much sooner than later, the people are going to go to war against them. These parasites aren't going to last for much longer. That's why they're doing everything they can to kick off World War III right now. When you've got billions of people who want to get them, who want to take them down, there is no force on earth powerful enough to stop that. These evil monsters are going down. They're going down. It's just a question of, are the police and military going to go down with them? Or are they going to join with the people and become a united force for good in the world? It shouldn't be a difficult decision. This should not be a hard sell for us.
But are you optimistic that, you know, with works like your book and people waking up to the dangers of central bank digital currencies, that is it still possible to stop it if there's a global awakening of people saying, no, we don't want it?
It is absolutely possible to stop it. This is the end of the road for a totalitarian ideology, which, you know, people don't realize that has always been also been joined at the hip with the central banks. They've been behind all this stuff in every incarnation because they want central control, they want warfare, they want instability. They are not capitalists. They are central planners. And as Hayek says, the real world is so complex, it cannot be centrally planned. What you need are constantly reorganizing autonomous entities. They used to be called people. That is how you meet human needs. But that is not their objective. Once it goes to central planning, it might look good to begin with. It might look benevolent, but then it tips into malevolence. And totalitarianism always ends horrifically. The problem is they have been able to run with unlimited money for a century. So all of the PSYOPs, all of the intelligence agencies, all of the propaganda, public facing, all of this is run by these entities that have been totally unchecked. I think it is important for people to think about how wonderful the world can be. Things can get better right away by just, my two things are give people back their stuff. How's that as an economic policy? Give people back their stuff. There's no reason you can't know who owns what. And secondly, stop hurting people. It's very simple, but we will never get out from under this if the control by the central banks continues. I'm absolutely certain of that.
But I do have a far more detailed presentation that will go into how we can use media, both the professional paid liars and the truthful independent media, to actually make this into a worldwide movement. The plan that I have will expose the paid liars for what they are, because they won't get on board with this idea. But those who get on board, we will know they're on our side. So I've already got that presentation. It's already done. I just need to edit it down. I'm sure some of you are going to be asking, isn't this guy worried about these elitist monsters sending out some CIA agent out to do whatever they want to me? So I'm going to let David Rogers Webb answer that question. There's a lot of things about his outlook on government that I don't really agree with, but here's one thing I agree with wholeheartedly.
I mean, do you feel safe?
I would have to say that my freedom is that I am not afraid to die. I'm really not. That you have to transcend that, and then you're free.
And one of the other reasons I feel called to do this is because, in my view, this is a part of the Christian faith. When I look at the way Christ flipped over the tables on the money changers, essentially what Jesus did was he was speaking truth to power, regardless of if it was at risk to his personal well-being. He was willing to take that risk because he knew that some things were more important than his personal well-being. I believe that is a part of Christianity. I think you have to be willing to walk that path. And I see many other people feel exactly the same way as I do.
So, if I get my brains blown out, did it to Jesus, and I'm a warrior for the Prince of Peace, maybe you'll do it to me too.
There are aspects of Christianity that I love and hold dear, and I try to practice in my daily walk through life. But there's a lot more to why this is so important to me. What I've got coming for you on this channel, I believe it's going to change the world, but you have to believe that in order for it to change the world. I'm not asking you to believe me. I wouldn't recommend just trusting anybody that's just come along out of nowhere, and I definitely don't want you to believe me. But what I am going to ask of you is that you take a chance on sharing this video with one other person. If every one of you shares this video with one other person, I will be able to upload my solution video within days. Here's my promise to you. The solution that I have will bring an end to debt. It will bring an end to the slavery of taxation. It will bring an end to the failing infrastructure all around us and kick off a golden age of absolute abundance for all, funded by the criminal oligarchs who have been fleecing our society for centuries. My commitment to you is you will have a solution that you will be able to carry out within a couple of hours. It's legal, it's lawful, it's peaceful, it's safe, it's much safer than doing nothing, and I will deliver that to you in a step-by-step process on this channel. That's what I've got coming up right here on Flipping the Tables. I'm Ricky DeBono, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to being with you again in the next video. God bless everyone, see you soon.
We really do have the opportunity now to create a new golden age.